Seattle making a major announcement yesterday about marijuana.
So the city announced it would move to vacate all misdemeanor pot possession convictions now that pot is, of course, legal in Washington state. Seattle's Mayor Jenny Durkan joining our Brandy Cruz live in studio to talk more about that big decision. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. Mayor. How are you?
Good
by
morning.
the way,
I'm great, Brandy.
Haven't seen you in a while. This is a big announcement yesterday. It had Twitter all abuzz all over the country, really. First and foremost, is the court going to agree with you to vacate all these convictions? Because you've promised it now.
You know, the court obviously has to make its own decision, and it's in the court's discretion, but we've worked with the court to make sure that the pleadings would be correct. They understood why we're doing it. And the fact that the government is bringing the motion gives us an extra credit. So I'm fully confident that the court will go along with the motion.
My big question I had when this happened is, I've been in Seattle long enough to know that the city sometimes likes to do things because of the optics or because of how they look. So I wondered, is this more ceremonial or does this have real impacts on people's lives who have been convicted of misdemeanor pot possession? So what do you think?
Absolutely great question, and it absolutely has real impacts. It's not ceremonial. Hundreds of people are sitting with convictions on their record that keep them from getting jobs, apartments, the range of things that we take for granted. They have to answer yes, have you been convicted? This will give them the opportunity to clean their record of that so they can say no. We know it wasn't fair or just. The war on drugs targeted users primarily instead of giving them alternatives to incarceration and treatment. And so I think we're making up a little bit for past mistakes. It's not enough, but it's a first good step.
To play devil's advocate here a little bit, there are people who say, listen, even though pot is legal now and we've changed our thought process in this state on marijuana, this was illegal at the time to carry around pot even for personal use, and they broke the law, and so they paid for that. So what do you say to those people that reversing it sends the wrong message?
I think we look historically at things we've done as a nation, and we often make things illegal that we then look at and say, you know what, maybe that was the wrong way to go. You look, for example, on marriages between the races was illegal in most states. That clearly was a wrong way to go. And if you look at marijuana today, we have shown that having a legal system has been better for public safety. And since it is, why don't we go back and correct the mistake for those people who are carrying a stigma that really hurts their life?
On the flip side, there are some people who say this doesn't go far enough. I know that you wrote an editorial saying you're hoping other cities and counties and states look at what Seattle has done with this and fall in line. But there are people in our prison system, not many in Washington state, but there are people in prison systems on drug charges. There are people who've been charged with felonies for marijuana-related offenses, whether it's distribution, sale of marijuana. Do you think that those types of convictions ought to be vacated as well?
I talked to Dan Satterberg, who's the prosecutor for the county, which handles all the felonies in King County. We also reached out to the state attorney general, and I think they've got to look at those convictions to make sure that those that would be legal under the system today, though that were really non-violent offenses, they can look to vacate those as well. Obviously, at the felony stage, sometimes it's more complicated because there's multiple charges, sometimes there's weapons involved, et cetera. So I think they're going to have to take a thorough look at that. But really, for those things that would be legal today, we shouldn't be having those people go forward with this kind of mar on their record.
Is it weird for you to be on this side of things? You were, for people who don't know, a former United States attorney. It was your responsibility and your job to enforce the law. So is it odd to be on this side of things and to say we want to wipe out hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases?
No, because I think the number one role that a prosecutor has, and particularly federal prosecutors, is justice. And your job is to control and protect public safety. And so you focus on those crimes that most endanger public safety. Having small amounts of marijuana is not one of those crimes. It's why when we crafted the Cole Memorandum, which was how the federal government decided what parts of legal marijuana could go forward, we really focused on those things that were the federal interest and the public safety interest, making sure it stays out of the hands of kids, making sure it's not around schools, making sure people aren't driving while they're smoking. Those things are still public interest. And we would say today that those people who operate outside the legal marijuana system still could be prosecuted, because it's really important to have a system that works and not just have moonshiners.
You didn't have one of these misdemeanor pot convictions, did you?
Did not.
Okay, just had to ask. I didn't know if there was a conflict of interest there.
And I won't ask the reciprocal question, I promise.
I don't. Moving on, 2.5 months on the job. You haven't fixed the homeless problem yet. You haven't fixed affordability. What's taking so long?
That's right. I know why.
2.5 months. The clock is ticking.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, these problems have been so long in the making, and I think we're making progress on affordability. About 3 weeks ago, I announced $100 million that we're going to have on more affordable housing. We have announced other programs. We have a bill pending right now before the council that will give us money to have short-term housing for homeless in the way of tiny houses or portables or other things. So we know we need both long-term fixes and we need some immediate relief for those people who are experiencing homelessness today, living in tents, living in cars, living in vehicles. We're going to not have a one-size-fits-all solution. People have to understand that, you know, there's never been a society in America that has fixed homelessness completely, but we have to do better than what we're doing. And so we have to be looking at the different populations on the street, moms with kids, veterans, and help people where they are, get people employment if they can do a job. And then at the end of the day, we really have to figure out a way to get more resources for those that have mental health issues and addiction issues. And that's why I'm really excited about the larger regional effort I have with King County, the mayors up and down the corridor, because we're only going to fix this if we do it as a region.
Yeah, and I will tell you, while you guys look to address the problem differently, we are looking to address it differently as well. And that means making sure that we're actually holding you to the standards that you set for yourself, that we're checking in frequently and saying, are the actual number of people living on the streets, is that number going down? So it just happened to be that you're the mayor during this time when we realized that we in the press need to hold our elected officials to a higher standard on that issue,
you know, and
housing as well.
That's
so
a great question. I just want to, when you say is it going down, is we're actually housing more homeless people and providing long-term housing than we ever have before. The problem is we have more people falling into homelessness. So one of the things we're really focused on is root causes, so we can have the prevention piece, which has been totally lacking, that we're going to try to work on.
We're going to be checking in with you on that. We're out of time, but I do want to have you back on down the road to talk about Seattle Promise, this free college tuition program, because we didn't get to that today. But Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, as always, we appreciate your time, and we'll be tracking some of these things you're working on.
Terrific. Thank you, Brandy.